At the end of the 19th century, a wave of naval innovation swept across Europe. Inspired by early submarines like the French Gymnote of 1888 and the Spanish Parral of the same year, Italy began developing its own submarines. The goal was to strengthen coastal defense and torpedo capabilities. This was influenced by the self-propelled torpedoes created by British engineer Robert Whitehead in the 1860s in the city of Fiume. The Italian Royal Navy understood the strategic potential of shallow water operations against large squadrons. To avoid relying on foreign designs, the Italians started their own experiments. The submarine Delfino was the first step in this direction. Delfino was the experimental brainchild of naval engineer Giacinto Pullino, who worked at the shipyard in La Spezia. He led this project to test the basic principles of submerged navigation and push Italian engineering forward. Pullino drew on global experience but focused on simplicity and affordability. His vessel was more of a conceptual model than a production boat. Records on the start of construction vary. Some sources point to 1889, while others say 1892. This is because the project began as an informal experiment. The main innovation was an experimental single-hull design. It significantly simplified construction. The boat featured advanced control mechanisms, namely 2 vertical rudders at the stern and 1 at the bow for better stability while submerged. Horizontal planes at the front and back helped control the pitch angle and diving depth. The power plant had 2 propellers with a vertical axis for maneuvering up and down. In theory, this helped the boat dive and surface, but in practice, it proved ineffective during prolonged operation. Delfino was intended primarily for shallow water testing. They used it to test diving methods, the electric motor, and the ability to fire torpedoes. The submarine was not built for actual combat. It merely validated the concept. It was a very cautious step for Italy into the world of submarine warfare. The creation of Delfino coincided with the Italian Navy's massive interest in submarine warfare. This boat started a lineage that developed quickly in the following decades. By the end of World War I, Italy had built and operated about 80 submarines of 21 different classes. These ranged from tiny vessels for harbor defense to large cruiser submarines for the Mediterranean Sea. All these massive efforts trace their origins back to Pullino's experimental vessel. Unlike Britain, Japan, or Austria-Hungary, which bought their first submarines abroad, Italy relied on its own engineers and shipyards from the very beginning. This policy of self-reliance began with Delfino and lasted through almost the entire pre-war construction program. As the first experimental submarine of the Italian Navy, Delfino was built under the strict supervision of its creator, Giacinto Pullino. The hull was made of steel, which was standard for early prototypes. The design featured innovations like an electric motor driving 3 propellers, 2 of which had vertical axes to assist in diving. Since the project was strictly experimental, the construction process involved constant testing of parts right during assembly. Pullino personally supervised the work and the installation of the battery power system. Records concerning its construction are varied. Some accounts suggest the keel was laid in the fall of 1889. However, official Italian Navy documents place this between 1892 and 1895. Launch dates range from 1890 to 1892, with work completion between 1892 and April 1895. These discrepancies arose because the submarine was a prototype and shipyard documentation standards were in flux. Even so, the Delfino represented a significant leap forward in Italian naval engineering. Engineer Pullino and his team prioritized basic seaworthiness, assembling the boat by hand in La Spezia. Sea trials commenced on April 29, 1892, at the La Spezia shipyard and continued until April 1895. The crew evaluated diving capabilities, maneuverability, and essential operating systems. During critical tests, the submarine successfully dove to a depth of 98 feet. This demonstrated the effectiveness of the vertical propeller system for controlled descents and ascents. However, the battery-powered electric motor was only practical for brief submerged periods. Initially, issues arose due to limited battery capacity and challenges with handling while submerged. Stabilization mechanisms required adjustments, and propellers needed synchronization before the vessel was fully operational. Following extensive trials and the resolution of all issues, on April 1, 1896, the Delfino was formally commissioned into the Italian Navy. This was the culmination of years of painstaking work in La Spezia, which validated the submarine's potential as an experimental platform, despite its rudimentary design. The electric motor for the propellers was manufactured by the Italian company Savigliano, which later provided motors for other submarine classes. An engine producing approximately 65 horsepower drove the main shaft, while two auxiliary propellers with a vertical axis were responsible for diving and surfacing maneuvers. The selection of domestically produced engines and the hull designed by Polino established a lasting tradition in Italian naval shipbuilding. In the ensuing decades, the submarine construction program would rely on Italian shipyards and suppliers like Fiat and Ansaldo, preferring them over foreign manufacturers. The Italian submarine Delfino, completed in 1892, featured a compact design for experimental submerged operations. Its surface displacement was 95 tons, and its submerged displacement was 107 tons. The boat measured 81 feet in length, with a beam of 9 feet and a draft of 9 feet as well. This reflected the engineering constraints of the era, which emphasized maneuverability in coastal waters. Propulsion was entirely electric, powered by batteries. These batteries supplied energy to a single electric motor that drove 3 propellers, 1 horizontal and 2 vertical. This setup allowed the boat to move silently when submerged. Its surface speed was 6 knots, and its submerged speed was 5 knots. The submerged range extended to 24 nautical miles at a speed of 2 knots. The battery-only system, lacking an auxiliary surface engine, restricted its operational range and necessitated frequent recharging. This further underscores that the Delfino was conceived as an experimental project rather than a combat-ready platform. Its armament comprised 2 bow-mounted 14-inch torpedo tubes. These were loaded manually, which allowed for testing compatibility with the experimental Italian torpedoes of the period. The crew consisted of 8 men, 1 officer and 7 enlisted sailors. They operated within confined spaces where every element was kept to a strict minimum, suitable for short dives. The diving depth was tested down to 98 feet. While this confirmed the basic integrity of the pressure hull, it also highlighted its vulnerability during extended submerged periods. The modernization of the Italian submarine Delfino took place from 1902 to 1904 at the Naval Shipyard in La Spezia. The work was led by engineer Cesare Laurenti, who was the director of technical experiments for this vessel and is considered the father of Italian submarines. This refit fixed the main flaws of the original all-electric design. It transformed the Delfino from an experimental craft into a fully capable submarine, able to stay surfaced for long periods. Cesare Laurenti put a lot of effort into this project. He graduated from the Royal Naval School of Genoa with a degree in naval and mechanical engineering and received his officer commission on June 7, 1892. Laurenti became the director of technical experiments for the Delfino early in the boat's service and worked alongside Polino before taking sole charge of the 1902 to 1904 rebuild. The upgrade of the Delfino paved the way for Laurenti's first independent design, the Glauco class of 1905, which became Italy's first true class of combat submarines. That same year, he became the technical director at the Muggiano shipyard near La Spezia. There, he designed the Foca, the Medusa class, the Argonauta, and the mass-produced F-class boats of the war years. In 1909 and 1910, he was even commissioned to design the submarine USSG-4 for the United States Navy. The double-hull principle that he perfected in these later designs became the standard in submarine construction for many years. It was copied by navies around the world, but at its core was the experience Laurenti gained while rebuilding the original Delfino. The propulsion system was vastly improved by adding a 130 horsepower Fiat gasoline engine for running surfaced. It supplemented the existing electric motor, which was used while submerged. These changes increased the surface speed to between 6 and 8 knots, and the surfaced range grew to 165 nautical miles at 6 knots. The submerged speed remained around 5 knots, with a submerged range of 24 nautical miles at 2 knots. The gasoline engine also allowed the batteries to be recharged while running surfaced. At the time, this was a groundbreaking feature that greatly increased tactical flexibility. Structural modifications included shortening the hull to 79 feet and enlarging the conning tower to improve surface navigation and accommodate the new engine. These changes increased the surface displacement to 102 tons and the submerged displacement to 113 tons. The larger conning tower also made operating the periscope and charging the batteries much easier. The armament was modernized by replacing the two original 14-inch torpedo tubes with a single 18-inch bow tube. It was compatible with the newer Italian torpedoes and featured better loading mechanisms for greater reliability. This 18-inch caliber, which was first installed on the Delfino during her refit, became the standard torpedo tube size for nearly every Italian Navy submarine built over the next 2 decades. It was only replaced in the mid-1920s when Italy switched to the globally accepted 21-inch tube for its newest designs. The crew capacity was increased to 10 people, 2 officers and 8 sailors, to meet the higher operational demands of the hybrid power plant and the expanded hull. Overall, this modernization fixed the initial flaws of the submarine Delfino, such as its limited surface speed and short range. This allowed it to be used effectively in upcoming naval exercises and influenced later designs like the Glauco-class submarines. After being commissioned in 1895, Delfino was transferred to the La Spezia Naval Base. There, the boat operated mostly as part of an experimental squadron, focusing on underwater tests and developing tactics. The submarine carried out numerous experimental dives and torpedo firing tests. It became a platform for improving vessel control and raising crew skills during submerged operations. These activities aimed to train Italian naval sailors in the latest tactics, including coordination between surfaced and submerged operations. Ultimately, this helped lay a solid foundation for the development of the Italian naval submarine forces. Until 1914, Delfino took part in several naval maneuvers and public demonstrations. In particular, it showed off its diving and surfacing capabilities to the High Command during exercises off the coast of Liguria. Since it was a prototype with limited endurance due to an all-electric power plant without an initial surface engine, its use was strictly limited to Italian waters. The submarine did not go on any extended patrols or overseas missions. Operating the boat also revealed ongoing problems, including frequent mechanical breakdowns caused by early design flaws. Battery wear and tear, along with stress on the pressure hull during dives, required continuous maintenance. However, this experience helped significantly improve future Italian submarine designs. In the early 1900s, after a major modernization completed in 1904 that added a gasoline engine for surfaced running, Delfino transitioned to a semi-operational role. This allowed for extended training patrols in the Mediterranean Sea for tactical drills and endurance testing. During this period, the submarine did not see any combat. It was used to test technologies and train personnel, helping advance the development of the Italian submarine fleet just before World War I. When World War I broke out in 1914, Delfino remained in active service despite its age. It was mobilized into the Royal Italian Navy and initially transferred to Venice to carry out coastal defense duties in the Adriatic. After Italy entered the war on May 24, 1915, the submarine was assigned to mobile coastal defense. It conducted reconnaissance patrols and set up ambushes to monitor the movements of the Austro-Hungarian naval forces in the upper Adriatic Sea. Throughout the conflict, Delfino completed about 29 combat sorties. These included 14 in 1915, 10 in 1916, and 5 ambush missions between May and November 1917. All of these were mostly focused on defensive tasks near the Venetian lagoon. These patrols made an important contribution to the overall efforts of Italian submarines in the Adriatic, even though the activities of Delfino were limited to short-range operations because its design was pretty outdated by that time. Aside from patrolling during the war, Delfino also served as a training vessel. Its pre-war experience helped teach new submariners diving techniques, torpedo tactics, and the basics of vessel control. From May 1916 to May 1917, it hosted the headquarters for the Submarine Flotilla Command. This experience helped shape early Italian doctrine, where the primary mission was defensive reconnaissance rather than aggressive attacks. But due to a limited surface speed of 10 knots, a range of 165 nautical miles, and an armament of just one 17.7-inch torpedo tube, Delfino did not sink a single vessel. The submarine simply wasn't suited for prolonged combat against modern opponents. By the end of the war, the boat still hadn't received a deck gun, which had become standard for the Italian fleet starting with the 1913 Pollino class. Throughout this time, its only weapon remained that same single torpedo tube. In late 1918, due to wear and aging, Delfino was placed in reserve. In November, it was briefly sent to Porto Corsini, after which it returned to Venice, where it finally ended its service. On January 16, 1919, the submarine was struck from the Italian Navy list. This marked the end of its nearly 30-year career. On February 19, 1919, Delfino was sent to dry dock and later scrapped. The name Delfino returned to the Italian fleet in 1930, when a new Squalo-class submarine was laid down. It was launched in April 1930 and commissioned into service in June 1931. Even though it had no structural similarities with the first Delfino, this submarine saw action in the Spanish Civil War and World War II. It became famous for sinking the Greek cruiser Ellie in the harbor of Tinos Island on August 15, 1940. This unprovoked attack occurred just weeks before the start of the Greco-Italian War. The new Delfino sank after colliding with another Italian vessel in the Mediterranean Sea in March 1943. The fact that the name was preserved for nearly half a century and across two different generations of technology proves just how important a place in history the original 1892 Delfino holds. This was the submarine that started the era of the Italian submarine fleet.